She didn't knock. She just stepped inside like the door had been waiting for her hand. I was half awake, standing in the small kitchen of my rented place, trying to convince stale grounds to behave like real coffee. Then the door clicked, soft but sure, and there she was, Nora. My neighbor's older sister. Mid-40s, poised in a way no one my age could ever fake, holding a steaming cup like she owned the morning. "Yours smelled like engine oil," she said, setting the mug down on the counter before I could even react. Her tone was light, but her eyes stayed on me a second longer than it should have been casual. I'd seen her around the building a few times, always in passing, always polished. Today, she wasn't dressed up. Simple slate sweater, fitted jeans, hair loose around her shoulders. Somehow that made her more dangerous than heels and lipstick ever could. "You came in just to fix my coffee?" I tried to sound casual, but my voice caught in my throat. She heard it. I knew she did. "Well," she said, stepping closer, "I figured if you burned another batch, the hallway would smell like regret for a week." She was close enough now that the warmth from the mug mixed with the warmth from her. A faint trace of perfume, something subtle, clean, expensive, rose every time she moved. I reached for the cup, brushing her fingers by accident. At least, I told myself it was an accident. She didn't pull her hand away right away. Just watched me, chin tilted slightly like she was measuring something. Her fingers were warm. Softer than I expected. She let the contact linger one beat longer than polite, and my breath stalled somewhere in my chest. "You're welcome," she said, finally letting go. I couldn't tell if she was amused or something else entirely. She leaned against the counter like she'd been there 100 times, like this wasn't my space at all but hers. The quiet between us didn't feel empty, it felt loaded, like a rope pulled tight but not snapped. "So," I said, trying not to stare at her mouth, "you always break into men's kitchens at 8 a.m.? She lifted one brow. "Please. You left the door unlocked." That's basically an invitation. There was no smirk, no tease, just a simple statement that made my pulse do something reckless. I lifted the coffee to hide the way I suddenly didn't trust my expression. It was good. Too good. Her lips curved when she saw the surprise hit me. "Figured someone should teach you how to brew something that doesn't taste like burnt paper." I swallowed. "And that someone had to be you?" She didn't blink. "You didn't seem like you'd say no." That landed somewhere deeper than it should have. I set the mug down before I dropped it. The sun wasn't fully up yet. Pale light bled through the blinds, cutting soft shadows across her face and catching in her hair. I noticed the faint crease near her mouth, the kind people only get from holding back too many smiles, or too many words. I didn't know which one she was guilty of. She looked around the kitchen but not really. Her attention came back to me like it hadn't left. "You've been here a month," she said. "Never asked if you needed anything." It wasn't a question. It wasn't a complaint. It was something else, something quiet, maybe edged with a kind of loneliness I recognized even if neither of us said it out loud. Before I could answer, she reached past me to open a cabinet. Her arm brushed my shoulder, light but electric. I froze, not because it startled me, but because it didn't. She paused there, too close, too on purpose, fingertips resting on the cabinet handle, head slightly turned toward me, her breath just brushing my jaw. Then, a sharp knock rattled the front door. She didn't step back. And I didn't move. Her eyes flicked to mine, and the look she gave me wasn't surprise. It was a question I wasn't ready to answer. The knock didn't come again. Whoever it was must have left, or decided morning wasn't worth the effort. But neither of us moved until the silence settled back in, slow and deliberate. Nora's hand was still on the cabinet handle, my shoulder still remembering the heat of her arm. She stepped back first, but not far. Just enough to pretend she had. Her voice was even when she spoke. "You should lock your door." "You'd still find a way in," I said before thinking. Her eyes held mine, sharp, assessing, but softened a second later. Not into a smile, not into anything easy. just less guarded. She stayed in the kitchen like she wasn't finished. I didn't ask her to leave. We sat at the small table, her with nothing, me with the coffee she'd made. The space between us felt smaller than it was. She traced a circle on the table with the edge of her thumb, absent, but not careless. "You live alone?" I asked, just to say something. "For a long time now." She didn't look at me when she said it. "Divorce is quieter than people think." I didn't expect her to say it so plainly. Maybe she wasn't trying to. Maybe she was just tired of pretending small talk mattered. "How long?" 7 years. She shifted her gaze to the window, but her shoulders stayed too still. People get used to not asking the details. I didn't push. I didn't need to. The way she held herself said more than anything she'd admit, someone who stopped expecting softness unless she brought it herself. "My longest relationship barely survived college," I said, more to match her honesty than offer anything meaningful. "Ended before it mattered." "It mattered to you," she said, quiet but certain. I didn't answer. She didn't force it. The morning felt slower around her, heavier. The light caught in her hair, and I caught myself watching the way a strand rested against her collarbone. I looked away before she caught me, but she already had. She didn't mention it. Instead, she stood, brushing invisible crumbs from her sweater. "People around here talk when they're bored. Your neighbor, my brother, likes to assume things." There it was. The warning. Not harsh, not cold, just placed gently between us like a line on the floor. Not for her sake, maybe, but mine. "Do you care what they assume?" I asked. She paused at the counter, fingers resting on the handle of the mug she'd brought me. Her back was to me, but I could see the tension in the way she held her arm. "About some things," she said. "Not all." The air felt different again, quieter, heavier, but not uncomfortable. She turned, and in the slow movement of her body, something unspoken flickered through her expression. Something that made my chest tighten before I could stop it. She stepped past my chair, meaning to leave. I thought she would. Then she stopped behind me. Not right behind, just close enough that her presence brushed my back like a shadow with weight. Her hand rested briefly, barely, on my shoulder. Warm. Light. Gone too quickly to be casual. But not quick enough to be accidental. "Nora," I whispered without meaning to say her name. She heard. She didn't turn. "We'll pretend you didn't say that," she murmured, voice low enough that I felt it more than heard it. Then she walked to the door. She didn't look back. But her hand lingered on the doorknob longer than it needed to, 3 seconds too long, maybe 4, before pulling it open and stepping into the hall. And the space she left behind didn't feel empty. It felt like a promise she didn't get permission to speak. I didn't see her again for 3 days. Not in the hallway, not on the stairs, not even through the window she always kept half open. I told myself I wasn't noticing, but every time I stepped outside, I caught my eyes shifting to her brother's door like I was checking the weather. By the 4th day, I gave up pretending. I was heading out with a half-zipped jacket when I heard a voice behind me. "Going somewhere important?" I turned. Nora stood in her doorway, hair pulled back, sleeves pushed to her elbows. No smile, no invitation, just that unreadable calm she wore like armor. "You disappeared," I said before I could swallow it back. She leaned her shoulder against the doorframe, crossing her arms. "I had things to do." The answer wasn't cold. It was defensive. Like she'd rehearsed it. I should have left it there. But I didn't. "You avoiding me?" Her eyes narrowed, just slightly. Not offended. More, caught. She didn't answer. Instead, she nodded inside her apartment. "Come here." Not a request. Not exactly a command, either. Just something she expected me to follow. I did. Her place was neater than mine, lived in but carefully controlled. Books stacked on the coffee table. A record player humming low, something old and slow, like a song that knew secrets. She closed the door behind me. The sound was soft, but final. You shouldn't ask questions like that, she said, moving past me toward the kitchen counter. Why not? Because you're too young to know what to do with the answers. Something in my chest sparked at that, defiance, maybe. Or something worse. You think I don't know what I'm doing? She paused with her back to me. Her breath lifted her shoulders once, then stilled. You don't understand what it costs, she said quietly. Not condescending. Just honest. I stepped closer, not touching her but close enough to see the faint tension in the line of her neck. Then explain it. She turned, slow, measured. Her eyes searched mine like she was looking for a reason not to speak. You're 23, she said. And you're 40. 44. I let the number sit between us. It didn't change anything. It only made the pull feel more deliberate. Her hand brushed the counter, fingertips grazing a mug she hadn't touched. People don't think about the man when they see something like this. Something like what? Her gaze dropped to my mouth. Just for a second. But I felt it like a hand. This, she whispered. The word was small but heavy. Before I could answer, her phone buzzed loudly on the counter. The screen lit with a name, her brother's. The sound snapped the air tight. She didn't pick up. Didn't silence it. Just watched the call until it stopped. He's downstairs, she said. Picking something up he left last week. The implication hit late, he could walk in. Right now. The door wasn't locked. She stepped toward me, too close now, the space between us thinner than breath. Her hand lifted, hesitated like it might touch my chest, then fell. We're not careful, she said, voice low, and people will see something that, she didn't finish, because the doorknob rattled. My pulse kicked. Her eyes snapped to the sound. We didn't move. A man's voice, her brother, muffled through the door. Nora? You home? She took one step back, but the air stayed charged, our bodies still angled toward each other like we hadn't agreed to step away. Yeah, she called, steady but quiet. 1 second. She didn't look at me when she said it. Or when she crossed to the door. Or when she placed her hand on the knob. But before she opened it, just before, she glanced over her shoulder. Not long. Not obvious. Just enough time for one look that said everything we didn't have room to speak. And when the door opened, and the noise of another voice filled the room, the space between us didn't close. It stretched. Tight. Invisible. And impossible to ignore. Nora didn't speak to me for the rest of that day. Not when her brother left. Not when I slipped out of her apartment before the silence could turn into something with edges. But the look she gave me before she closed the door, that stayed. 24 hours passed. Then another. I started to think maybe that moment, that closeness that almost tipped, had scared her more than she'd ever admit out loud. On the third night, I heard a knock. Not loud. Not hesitant. I opened the door, expecting, hoping, it was her. It was. She stood there in a dark coat, hair slightly undone like she'd run a hand through it too many times. No makeup. No practiced calm. Just eyes that wouldn't stop searching mine. Can I come in? She asked. I stepped aside. She walked in like she was trying not to think. I closed the door, and the click behind us felt louder than it should have. She didn't wait for me to speak. You've been quiet, she said, pacing once, then stopping by the couch. I wasn't sure if it was intentional. You vanished first. That's not the same thing. I knew she was right, but I didn't let her see it. You think hiding makes it easier? She flinched, not visibly, but in the way her breath paused before she answered. It makes it less dangerous, she said. Dangerous for who? I stepped closer. She held my stare. For me. For you. For what people think they're entitled to judge. I didn't move away. Neither did she. And you care about that more than what you actually want. Her jaw tightened. That was the first crack. I didn't say that. But you're acting like it, I said quietly. Her coat slipped slightly off one shoulder when she turned. She didn't fix it. I didn't know if she noticed. I'm trying to be smart, she said. Smart doesn't feel like this. She finally stopped moving. We were inches apart now. Her eyes dropped to my mouth again. She did it every time she got too close. I started to reach for her arm, then stopped halfway. She looked down at my hand. Then at my face. You don't understand, she said, but her voice was softer now. Not a wall. Not a warning. Something else. Something close to breaking. Then make me understand. Her breath hitched, not loudly, but enough for me to feel the air shift between us. I stepped closer, not touching her, but my hand hovered near her waist. If this was someone else, I said, someone my age, would you still be this scared? Her eyes lifted fast, and there it was, something wild, something defensive, something she'd kept buried under all that control. Don't do that, she warned. Do what? Make me say it. Say what? That she cut herself off. Her throat moved with the swallow she tried to hide. I lifted my hand, brushing a strand of hair back from her face. My thumb grazed the edge of her cheekbone, and she didn't step away. Her pulse fluttered at the side of her neck. I saw it. I felt it. You what? I asked. Her eyes flicked to my lips. Once. Then again. The distance between us was a breath. Maybe less. I think about you when I shouldn't, she said, barely above a whisper. The words hit like heat, low and electric. I leaned in, not quite touching her mouth with mine, but close enough to feel the tremor in her breathing. Nora, before her name was fully out of my mouth, her hand slid to my chest, not pushing, not pulling. Just resting there like she didn't know what she meant to do with it. Her forehead almost touched mine. Almost. If I don't leave, she said, voice shaking now, I won't. And just as she said it, my phone lit up on the table. Her eyes didn't leave mine. And neither of us moved. I didn't answer the call. The screen lit my name across her face for a second before it faded again. Neither of us looked away. She didn't move her hand from my chest. I didn't move mine from her waist. Everything between us felt held together by the kind of silence that comes right before something breaks. Then, 3 slow knocks at the door. Not loud. But intentional. Nora's hand dropped from me like she'd touched fire. I turned toward the sound, but she didn't. She just closed her eyes, just once, and opened them slowly, like she was buying herself a heartbeat of time. Another knock. More firm this time. She whispered, don't answer. But I was already moving. Not because I wanted to, but because the knocking came with a voice that froze both of us in place. Nora? You in there? Her brother. I looked at her sharply. He thinks I know, she said, too low to hear from the other side of the door. Her hand trembled once against her thigh before she caught it with the other. He saw you come in? Maybe. Her voice thinned. Or he heard something. The knocking stopped. Silence. The kind that listens. I couldn't see the hallway, but I could imagine him standing there, close to the door, trying to decide whether to come back or try the knob. She reached for my wrist, not pulling, not guiding, just anchoring. Her fingers were cool against my skin, but her pulse was rapid. I told him I haven't been seeing anyone, she said quietly. The words hit harder than they should have. Not because they were a lie. But because she'd said them recently enough that it mattered. When? Yesterday. I searched her face. He asked you? He asked if you'd been around me. Her throat tightened. He said you look at me a certain way. The silence between us wasn't empty. It was full of all the things she didn't want confirmed. And what did you tell him? My voice was low, not angry, but not calm either. That you're the one imagining things, she whispered. That if you were interested, you'd be chasing someone closer to your age. The words stayed in the air, heavy and slow. I didn't pull away. She didn't either. You regret saying it? I asked. No, she said, then hesitated. But I regret needing to. Something in my chest went tight and hot. I stepped closer, and she didn't back up this time, not with her feet. Just with her breath. You think this is just me chasing you? I said softly. She looked up at me then. Really looked. Her eyes weren't guarded. They were exhausted from pretending they should be. I think I don't get to want this out loud, she said. The hallway outside creaked. Her brother's footsteps faded, not too far, just enough for space, not enough for safety. I moved closer until her back almost touched the wall. My hand brushed hers, not gripping, not claiming, just touching. Like a question. She let her fingers slip between mine. You lied for us, I said. She didn't deny it. Her breath warmed the space between us. I shouldn't have. But you did. Her chest rose slowly, controlled, but the heat in her cheeks said everything control couldn't hold back. You're afraid he'll find out, I said. I'm afraid of what happens if he does, she corrected. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. My free hand moved up her arm, slow, deliberate. The fabric of her sleeve warmed under my fingers. When I reached her shoulder, she exhaled like she'd been holding air the whole time. Then, she stepped forward into me. Not all the way. Just enough that her body brushed mine, light and dangerous, like a match striking. You should go, she said, but didn't move. You want me to? She didn't nod. She didn't shake her head. She just closed her eyes and whispered, if you stay, everything changes. I leaned in until my breath touched her lips, but not my mouth. Then tell me to leave. She didn't. She didn't tell me to leave. And I didn't step back. The house had gone still again, like even the walls were waiting to see what we'd do. The only sound was her breathing, measured, but uneven at the edges. My forehead hovered an inch from hers. I could feel the warmth of her skin without touching it. Close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in her eyes when she finally opened them. You don't understand what this costs me, she murmured. I do, I said. And I still want it. Her throat worked as she swallowed. My hand was still at her shoulder, fingers light, not forcing anything. She looked at my mouth for half a second too long before catching herself. This isn't about wanting, she whispered. It's about surviving it afterward. Then don't survive it, I said quietly. Choose it. Her breath caught, silent but sharp, and she looked at me like I'd spoken something reckless and holy all at once. She pressed her back gently into the wall behind her, as if she needed something solid to keep her from moving forward. But her fingers were still between mine. You think wanting me is enough? She asked, not mocking, just scared of believing. No, I said. But I think pretending we don't feel this stopped being believable a while ago. The silence that followed wasn't hesitant. It was heavy, thick with everything neither of us had let ourselves say. She let out a breath, slow, warm, brushing my collarbone. Her hand lifted from my wrist and traced the air just above my sternum, not quite touching. Her palm hovered like she was afraid to make contact and more afraid not to. If I cross this line, she said, her voice softer now, I don't know how to go back. Then don't, I said. Her eyes flicked up to mine again, and that tiny crack in her restraint widened. She leaned in, not fully, not yet, but the air shifted, charged. I could feel the heat of her body through the inches left between us. You make it sound simple, she breathed. It is right now, I said. The hall outside was quiet. No footsteps. No knocks. Just possibility. Her hand finally touched my chest, flat, steady, but trembling at the edges. The contact made something low in my stomach tighten and rise. I didn't move. Didn't pull her closer. I wanted her to choose it, completely, without my hands guiding her. She took one slow breath. Then another. Then she moved forward the last inch. Her body met mine, lightly at first, then with a kind of surrender that wasn't loud or dramatic, just certain. Her forehead touched mine, and for a second, we just stayed like that, breathing the same shared inch of air. "When did this happen?" she whispered. "The first time you laughed at something I said," I answered. She made a soft, almost disbelieving sound, but she didn't pull back. Her hand slid up to my collar, fingers brushing my neck. I felt her hesitation flicker once, and then burn out. I raised my other hand, slow enough to stop if she flinched. I brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear. My knuckles grazed her cheekbone, and she exhaled like the touch undid something she'd kept tight for too long. Her lips were so close I could feel the shape of every breath. She didn't close the gap, but she didn't move away either. "Say it," she whispered. Not a command. A need. "I want you," I told her. Not rushed. Not dressed up. Just true. Her eyes closed for one suspended second. When she opened them, the fight was gone, but the fear wasn't. It just lived beside something stronger. And then, finally, she turned her face an inch and let her mouth brush mine. Not a full kiss. Not yet. Just enough to feel the promise of it, heat, breath, softness, risk. She didn't speak after that. She didn't need to. The choice was made. Her lips lingered against mine only a second before she pulled back just enough to breathe. Not far, just enough for her eyes to search mine, as if waiting for regret to show up and claim the moment. It didn't. I stayed close, my hands resting at her waist, her fingers curled loosely against my collar. The nearness wasn't electric now. It was grounding, quiet, steady, real. She let out a breath that sounded almost like relief. "I don't know what happens after this," she said softly. "We figure it out," I said. Without pretending anymore. Her eyes closed for a heartbeat, like those words were heavier than they looked. When she opened them, she didn't step away like I half expected. Instead, she slid her hands up to my shoulders, steadying herself like she'd finally stopped bracing for impact. "I keep thinking about how people will look at us," she admitted. "Let them look," I said. "They're not the ones here right now." She didn't argue, but the fear didn't vanish. It softened, though, as if the weight wasn't hers alone anymore. I brushed my thumb along her jaw, slow and deliberate. "You're allowed to want something even if it scares you." "And you're not scared?" she asked, not accusing, just curious. "I am," I said honestly. "But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you." That made something in her expression finally loosen. She leaned into my touch then, not hiding the way her body melted forward. I guided her gently into my arms, and she came willingly, her forehead resting against the base of my throat, her fingers twisting lightly into the fabric of my shirt. We stayed like that longer than either of us needed to, but neither of us rushed it. The kind of closeness that didn't need noise, or permission, or an excuse. When she finally drew back, it wasn't to retreat, it was to see me more clearly. Her palm stayed pressed to my chest, as though she trusted something solid there. "You really want this?" she asked quietly. I laced my fingers through hers. "I'm already in it." A small laugh slipped out of her, soft, almost surprised. Not from humor, but from something warmer. She looked down at our hands, the way her fingers fit between mine, then back up. "You realize this doesn't magically erase the hard parts," she said. "No," I said. "But it makes them worth it." For the first time, she didn't look like she was fighting two versions of herself. She stepped closer again, her hips brushing mine, her body leaning in without hesitation. Our joined hands rested between us, and she brought her other hand to the back of my neck, gentle but sure. "Then stay," she said. Not a plea. Not an order. Just truth. I was never leaving, I answered. She kissed me again, longer this time, slower. Not rushed, not stolen. Chosen. When we finally pulled apart, she rested her forehead against mine, her breathing calm now. Whatever came next, we weren't standing on opposite sides of it anymore. We were in it, together.